Good morning. We are going to be starting lesson 6 today, and it is just a one-day lesson, lesson 6, and you do have an application problem that you will need to complete. So make sure that when you're doing this problem, you remember to use cubes and read, draw, and write. And, oh, I almost forgot. Make sure, oh, it's so important today, you need to watch the Eureka video. Yep, that's going to be a really important step for you today because we are going to be going some places you might not have been before. So make sure that you watch that Eureka video. And when you do that, you'll find in your lesson that there is a template that you're going to need today, a template for a tangram. Mrs. Chin will give you lots and lots of different, oops, I've got my tangram upside down. Here we go. So you're going to need to cut your tangram out. There are 7 pieces of your tangram. I don't know if you've ever seen one of these before, perhaps maybe in first grade or perhaps kindergarten. I'm not sure about that, but I want you to look at where my finger is drawing. I'm drawing my finger around a very large triangle. See that very large triangle right there? That large triangle is made up of 2 triangles that are a little bit smaller. Here's a triangle here with 3 sides and 3 angles, and a triangle here with 3 sides and 3 angles. But if I was only looking at this much and I was not paying attention to that middle line, you can see that those 2 tangram pieces make a large triangle. Now I'm going to flip this over this way, and I'm going to show you the opposite side of the tangram. The tangram on this side also makes a large triangle that I'm tracing my finger over, but it is made up of a small triangle, a square, another small triangle, a parallelogram, and a larger triangle. So there are 7 pieces, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 pieces that when all put together form a large square, which would be a quadrilateral. So this tangram is made up of 7 different polygons. I prefer to have it go this way, 7 different polygons. And you will need to cut these pieces out. I'm just going to show you that these pieces, I've cut mine out. You're also going to cut yours out. Here is my parallelogram. Here is my larger triangle. I should have cut these out in a different color. This is my square, and then of course my 2 smaller triangles. Now when you cut this out, you need to make sure that you cut it out very carefully on the dark black lines, and then you'll be prepared to start the lesson today. So as I said, you need to watch that Eureka video. Mrs. Chin will help you have a better understanding of your tangram. You also need to do the application problem. I will tell you this, that it is a 2-step problem. Second graders should be able to do 2 steps by the end of 2nd grade, and that's what we're hoping you can do today. We'll go over that in a bit. Then the next thing you're going to be doing is the problem set. Identify each labeled piece of the tangram as precisely as possible. So you're going to be looking at this part of your tangram, which is part A, and write on the line what that is. Part B, or part B, I just said what that was just a second ago, so if you were listening, you probably know what it is. And of course, part C, and remember the word precisely. A quadrilateral would be a good definition of this, but if you got even more precise, you wouldn't just call it a quadrilateral. It has another name. And if you were listening just a second ago, I did tell you what it was. So if you need to, you can always rewind the video and go back. Okay, now I'm on question number 2. You're going to use a square. Let me just, whoops, where did my, here we go. I got to get that. You're going to be using the square. I just went and got myself a piece of pink paper because I think that will help you. So you are going to be on this first one, or the instructions tell you that you're going to need to use the square and the 2 small triangles. So these are the 3 pieces that you're going to be using, and I'm putting them on pink paper just because I think it will be easier for you to see what you're doing. If you have a piece of colored paper at your house, I would strongly suggest that you use colored paper because it makes those tangram pieces show up better. So these are the 3 pieces that you're going to use for problem set 2. And I'm going to fold my paper in half and in half again, because I think it will be easier for you if you do these 4 problems on a larger piece of paper. And I'll tell you why. Because you're going to be making polygon shapes with your tangram pieces, and it will just be easier for you to make these shapes. Maybe I shouldn't have folded it into those 4 parts. I'm thinking I might need a little bit more space than that. I think I just changed my mind. I think that we need to fold our paper in half. You'll have a little bit more space to be able to work if you do that. I just made that first shape, and it was a little bit too big for that that quarter. So I'm looking at part A on number 2. And on part A, number 2, you are supposed to do a quadrilateral with 1 pair of parallel sides. And you're going to be using these 3 tangram pieces. You're going to have to push things around and come up with a way that you could make I'm just going to tell you right now, this has to be a trapezoid. I think I'm going to give you what you're going to be making. Then it will be a little bit easier for you. This one needs to be a trapezoid. And this one, quadrilateral with no square corners, is going to be a parallelogram. I'm just going to give you this little extra hint because I think it's a bit challenging. A parallelogram. Even though I'm not going to be doing them on this page, I'm still going to help you with that. This one has to be a quadrilateral with 4 square corners, and that's going to be a rectangle. This is just a little hint because you're going to be very busy trying to figure these out. And then letter D says, oops, oh my gosh, that pink paper's making it interesting. You're going to do a triangle with 1 square corner, and that would be a right triangle. Okay, so I would, instead of doing it on this little piece of paper, I would do a larger piece of paper just because it will be easier for you to be able to use the pieces to actually be able to draw your shape. So I think you're going to need to have 2 pieces of colored paper in order to be able to do this. I think that's what I'm going to be having my face-to-face students do. So I'm just going to give you a little hint on how this one might possibly work. Remember, this one was going to be your trapezoid. And I'm going to write it on this paper too. Okay, so this one is going to be a trapezoid. And if I put this piece here, oops, let's see. There we go. Mister had to think about it for just a second. So I'm looking for a trapezoid. If you'll remember, a trapezoid has 1 pair of parallel sides. And those parallel sides would be this bottom part and this piece across the top. If I'm thinking about these 2 sides, which by the way, a trapezoid is a quadrilateral, if I was thinking about these 2 sides and I was to draw an imaginary line, they would eventually cross each other. So I only have 1 set of parallel sides, and I have a quadrilateral with 1, 2, 3, 4 sides. And your job is to trace that trapezoid, and if you use a larger piece of paper, you can actually use your pieces to help you be able to make that trapezoid. I did try drawing them freehand, and I found it to be a little bit difficult just because I had to draw it a lot smaller to fit inside that box, and I would really prefer that you use your pattern pieces to be able to do this. I'm getting the basic. There's the basic. Now I'm going to use my straight edge. Yep, I had to go get my straight edge. I'm going to use my straight edge to tighten that up just a little bit. Okay, so let's see here. Okay, I'm going to do this like this. I'm going to tighten that up just a tiny bit. Okay, and come across the list side. And if it's not absolutely perfect, that will be okay. You get it as close as you can. and so will I. So I'm saying that I've got a trapezoid here, and I'm just going to do this first one for you so you know what to do on the others. Okay, I'm going to close it up and erase some of these parts that are a little bit yickety there. So you can see that I do have a trapezoid. There it is with 1, 2, 3, 4 sides, and I've got a set of parallel lines, this one right here and this one. If I were to draw imaginary lines, those would never intersect. These sides, these two sides, if I were to draw an imaginary line, would eventually cross or intersect each other, and I think I'm going to do that one more time. So this side and this side are definitely parallel, because no matter how far I drew them apart, they would never intersect each other. So I have myself a trapezoid for part A, and I'm going to put those imaginary lines back, or not imaginary, but I'm going to put those pieces back in there. I wanted to show it to you without the pieces, because I used the pieces to be able to draw it. Do you remember that? I hope you do. I'm going to put those parts back in there so that I can see that with my tangram pieces, I have used a square and 2 of the small triangles to make a trapezoid. There we go, a square and 2 of the small pieces to make a trapezoid. So you're going to do that with the rest of these. That's going to be part B. I told you that should be a parallelogram. And C, I'm going to put on the back side. C is going to be a rectangle, and D is going to be a right triangle. Remember, a right triangle has to have at least one square corner, but it also has to be a triangle. So that would be how I would suggest that you do that. If you want to draw them in those little boxes, that's fine too, but I find it a lot easier to be able to use the pattern pieces to make those shapes. So there you go. That's my hint on how to be successful on today's lesson. Then you're going to move on to the second page, and you're going to be doing more of the same. You are going to be drawing some more shapes. This time, however, you're going to be using, let me just do a little switcheroo here, you're going to be using the parallelogram, which is this piece, and still the 2 small triangles. So use the parallelogram and 2 small triangles of your tangram pieces to make the following polygons. And you are supposed to draw them in these little teeny tiny spaces, but if I were you, I would get another piece of paper, just like we did on that first exercise, fold it in half, and do the pieces on another piece of paper, front and back. And I will give you the hint to let you know exactly where you're going. So on the first one, this one, you're going to be doing a trapezoid again. So this time you're going to be making a trapezoid. Remember, a trapezoid only has one set of parallel sides, so a quadrilateral with one pair of parallel sides. And oh my goodness, these are exactly the same things. They're exactly the same as we did on the other page, except that this time you're going to be using these 3 pieces. You're going to be using a parallelogram and the 2 small triangles instead of the square and the 2 small triangles. Alrighty, so you're going to be doing a trapezoid in the first box, a parallelogram in the second box, because you need a quadrilateral that has no square corners. So I have to make sure that these match the descriptions. And now I need a quadrilateral that has 4 square corners, and again you'll be making a rectangle, but you're going to have to figure out how to do it with a parallelogram and those 2 small triangles. Don't use any of the other pieces, and you need to use all of them. And of course your last one is going to be a right triangle. Now I'm going to tell you this particular lesson is pretty challenging, and it's going to take a lot of brain power to be able to figure out how to do that now that we've switched to a parallelogram and my 2 triangles. So have a lot of fun with that and use these pieces so that it's easier for you to be able to trace, and then you can straighten them up with your straight edge when you get done with that. So that's what you're doing on that part. And then down on number 4, you are going to rearrange the parallelogram and the 2 small triangles. Well, that's what you've been working with right here. And I would probably get another piece of paper because I don't think these are going to fit on there. They're just a little bit too big. They're too big to rearrange them. So another piece of colored paper would be very helpful. You are going to rearrange the parallelogram and the 2 small triangles to make this time a hexagon. If you remember, hexa means 6, so it will have to be a 6-sided figure. And you're going to draw it, well, I would draw it on another piece of paper. I wouldn't draw it on here. There's not enough space. Okay, and number 5, you're going to rearrange your tangram pieces again and make other polygons. And you can identify them as you work. And I would definitely do it on another piece of paper. Preferably a piece of colored paper so that your white tangram pieces show up better. You're probably going to use 3 or 4 different pieces of colored paper. All right, so that's your job for your assignment. And then your exit ticket is really going to be a ton of fun. You're going to use your tangram pieces to make 2 new polygons. You're supposed to draw a picture of each of them in these little teeny tiny boxes, which I'm not too keen on. So again, on your exit ticket, I would get myself a piece of colored paper, and I would use my tangram pieces. The ones that we've used so far have been the parallelogram, the 2 triangles, and the square and the 2 triangles. I would make one using the parallelogram and the 2 triangles for one of your answers to your exit ticket. The second answer to your exit ticket, I would use the square and the 2 triangles. And as far as the other pieces are concerned, they're not going to be used in this lesson today. But you can, when you get finished, you can use all 7 pieces. Here they are. You can use all 7 pieces to see what kinds of interesting things that you can create using your tangram. And if you really loved working with the tangram, I'm going to suggest that you go online and that you find other things that you can make with your tangram pieces, because I think you're going to find that it can be a whole lot of fun to say, oh my goodness, look at this. I am going to make, this is just for giggles, I'm going to make a little, here I'm just going to make this. I'm going to make, oops, I want, yep, nope, I got to go the other way. I am going to make a Christmas tree using my tangrams, or a pine tree. And you can really have a ton of fun doing this, making all kinds of pictures. There are thousands and thousands and thousands of cool things that you can make using tangram pieces. That's just an example of maybe a Christmas tree. Although I'm just going to say, there you go. So if you enjoyed those tangram pieces, you might like going to see what other things you can make. And there is also a really cool book, I wish I had it with me, called Grandfather Tang, that you could get from the library, that's all about tangrams and the fun things that you can make using tangrams. But today's just an introduction to the tangram. And of course, you do have a tangram template as a part of your lesson today that you can use. So with that, my friends, I'm going to have you pause the video. You might be a little while before you're back to see me, and because it was a little challenging. I did do the lesson by myself before looking at the answers to see if I was correct, and it was challenging me too, because it's been a while since I've worked with tangrams. But if you're struggling a little bit, get your family involved too. It's a fun family activity, and I don't have a problem with that at all. So with that, you're going to go ahead and finish this assignment and then come back and we will talk about your answers. So pause the video, and it's probably going to be a bit before I see you. See you in a minute or in a little while. Are you back? Boy, I hope you had a lot of fun with your tangrams today. I know I had fun with them yesterday when I was getting things ready for this lesson. And I'm looking forward to sharing it with our face-to-face kids this morning. So let's take a look at your problem application. Don't forget you're doing cubes. I hope you didn't forget cubes. And also read, draw, and write. And I hope you watched the Eureka video. You really needed to, because it would help you better with the tangrams. Frank has 19 fewer cubes than Josie. So I put a box around Frank, and I'm also going to put a box around Josie because I need to remember those two kids. So Frank has 19 fewer, boy, pay attention to that word fewer, cubes than Josie. Frank has 56 cubes, so I know exactly how many cubes Frank has. They want to use all of their cubes. Boy, I'm going to box that. They want to use all of their cubes to build a tower. How many cubes did they use? So we've got a how many. And as I told you, this is a two-step problem in order to be able to solve this. And I hope you did 2 steps. So let's take a look at step number 1. So I knew for sure what Frank had. He had 56 cubes. And I know that he had 19 fewer than Josie. So if I'm going to find out, well, Josie, quite honestly, was my mystery in my number bond, and also Josie was my mystery in my bar model. So I know that Frank had 56, and I've put it in my put it in my number bond and also in my bar model. So Frank had 56, but he had 19 fewer than Josie. So if I'm going to find out how many Josie has, so I'm going to need to know that before I can figure out how much they have together, I'm going to have to add how many Frank had to the how many less he had than Josie, so that I can figure out how many he had there was between, or what Josie had. So I know what Frank's was. He had 19 fewer than Josie, so this is an addition problem where I'm adding the 2 parts of my number bond together to give me my whole. So part plus part equals whole. 56 plus 19 gives me 75. That's because 6 ones and 9 ones are 15 ones, and I had to not regroup, but compose a 10. 5 tens plus 1 10 plus 1 more 10 gives me 7 tens, which gives me 75 pieces for Josie. And then, now that I know what Josie has, I can find out how much they have together. Well, Frank had 56, Josie had 75, and if I add 56 and 75 together, I'm going to get 131. 6 ones plus 5 ones is 11 ones, compose a 10. 7 tens plus 5 tens plus 1 more 10 gives me 13 tens, and I come up with 131 cubes together to build that tower. So if I was going to put that in words, Frank and Josie used 131 cubes together. Now, if you had trouble with that problem, you might want to go back and try that again and see if you can figure out where you made your mistake. But if you got it right the first time without any help, you are definitely getting ready for 3rd grade, because these are the kinds of problems that 2nd graders need to be able to do as they leave the 2nd grade. Alrighty, so let's move on to our problem set. Our first piece, letter A, was a triangle. 1, 2, 3 sides. Our parallelogram was part B. 1, 2, 3, 4. We have 4 sides because it's also a quadrilateral, but it also has 2 sets of parallel lines, and I'm just going to show that to you with my ruler. See my little parallelogram in there? This pair of sides is parallel and will never intersect each other, and these bottom and the top lines are also parallel and will not intersect each other. So a parallelogram, and of course we have a square that has all 4 sides the same length, and each of those angles is a right angle or a corner. Alrighty, so there's that. Now, I did draw these little tiny pieces here on my little tiny paper, which made me decide I would rather that you use the bigger paper like I demonstrated at the beginning. But I'm not going to go back and do every one of them on the colored paper. I'll just show you what they look like. But it was a little more difficult to have to draw them microscopic. So using the pattern pieces to help me draw those, and I hope you use the pattern pieces as well to help you draw yours, because it would just be a whole lot easier for you. So here's what the quadrilateral a quadrilateral with 4 sides and 1 pair of parallel sides, which would be a trapezoid. Here's your parallelogram with 2 sets of parallel sides. Here's 1 set of parallel sides. You can always check that with a ruler, 2 sets of parallel sides. So there's your parallelogram. a quadrilateral with 4 square corners, I told you you would be drawing a rectangle. 1, 2, 3, 4 sides, which makes it a quadrilateral, and it has 4 right corners, or 4 right angles, which 90-degree angles to be exact. And then, of course, your triangle would have been made this way, and your right angle or your corner is right down here in the corner with 1, 2, 3 sides. Oh, I'm hoping that you had so much fun with this. I know I did. A little challenging to have to draw them microscopic, but nevertheless it was fun. So this time I had to use my parallelogram and my 2 small triangles to create, again, another trapezoid that has 2 sets of parallel sides, or 1 pair of parallel sides and 1 pair of sides that are not parallel. There's my not parallel sides, and they're going to intersect. Here is my parallel sides, and they are not going to cross or intersect. Okay, here is what your parallelogram would look like if you were successful putting that one together. Here's what your rectangle would look like if you were successful getting a quadrilateral with 4 square corners, and your triangle with 1 square corner right there. And of course, I'm going to put those square corners in here because that's an important part of a rectangle. It has to have 4 right angles. Now, down here at the bottom, your picture might look different than mine. When I rearranged my parallelogram and my 2 triangles, I needed to come up with a hexagon. So I drew my shape, and then I showed the different lines in color so that I could see that I have 1 side, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, because hexa, if you'll remember, means 6. And I did a second hexagon. You may not have done a second hexagon, but I did when I rearranged mine, again with 1 side, 2 sides, little tiny side, 3, 4 sides, 5 sides, and 6 sides. But they are 2 different polygons, and both of them are hexagons. And I did not highlight these little pieces because I just wanted to show that it made a hexagon. Now, your job is to, hopefully you do it on another piece of paper so that it's going to be easier for you to draw. Your job, of course, is to make 2 new polygons using those pieces that we just talked about. And I would suggest that the first one you do with the square and the 2 small triangles, and the second one I would do with the parallelogram and the 2 small triangles. It would just be easier rather than trying to squish them into these little tiny boxes if you used another piece of paper, and even better if it's a colored piece of paper because you'll be able to see those tangram pieces better. And with that, my friends, I hope that you've had a really fun time with your tangrams, and that you might just find that it's a really fun puzzle to play with any old time, and I don't think I'd be throwing them away. They're a lot of fun. And with that, I am going to bid you a fond farewell and have a great day of learning.